Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're journeying to a town synonymous with one of the most chilling chapters in American history, Salem, Massachusetts. When you think of Salem, what comes to mind? Pointed hats, broomsticks, and tales of witchcraft, right? The town is filled with sites connected to the infamous 1692 witch trials. But what if I told you that one of its most famous witch houses holds a secret that's far more complex and, in many ways, even more haunting than the legends suggest? I'm talking about the Jonathan Corwin House, better known to millions of tourists as simply the Witch House. It's an imposing, black, gabled structure that looks like it was plucked straight out of a spooky storybook. It's the only building still standing in Salem with direct ties to the trials, and for that reason, it draws crowds from all over the world. People come here expecting to feel the spectral presence of an accused witch. For decades, visitors and locals have shared unnerving stories about this very house. One of the most persistent and chilling tales is the sound of disembodied sobbing, said to emanate from the sealed-off attic. Tourists standing on the street below, especially on quiet, misty evenings, have reported hearing faint, sorrowful cries drifting down from the uppermost window. The legend grew that these were the ghostly wails of a woman accused of witchcraft, perhaps one who was held or tormented within these walls, her spirit forever trapped in a cycle of grief and despair. It's a powerful and evocative story, one that fits perfectly with the popular image of Salem. People imagine a woman, wrongfully accused, her spirit lingering in the place of her suffering. It is the kind of ghost story that sends shivers down your spine and sells a lot of souvenir t-shirts. But here's where history throws a major plot twist into our ghost story. The narrative that has been told for generations has one crucial detail wrong. The house didn't belong to a witch. It belonged to a man who sent them to their fate. Let's rewind the clock to the late 17th century. The owner of this house was Jonathan Corwin. He wasn't just any resident of Salem, he was a wealthy merchant and a respected local magistrate. And when the witch hysteria began to bubble up in 1692, Corwin was appointed to the court of Oyer and Terminer, the special court established to hear and decide the witchcraft cases. This house, this very building, was his home. It was from here that he would walk to the courthouse to participate in the proceedings that would lead to the deaths of 20 innocent people. So, this wasn't the home of a victim. It was the home of a judge, an interrogator. Jonathan Corwin was one of the men who presided over the examinations of the accused. Imagine the scene. Terrified men and women, often in chains, brought before him and other magistrates. They were badgered, questioned relentlessly, and pressured to confess to impossible crimes, like flying through the air or making pacts with the devil. Corwin listened to the so-called spectral evidence, where accusers claimed the defendant's spirit was tormenting them, evidence that was impossible to refute. He was a key figure in the legal machine that condemned people based on fear, superstition, and mass delusion. Historical records, including transcripts from the trials, show Corwin's direct involvement. He questioned Bridget Bishop, the first person executed in the trials. He was there for the examinations of Giles Corey, the elderly man who was pressed to death with stones for refusing to enter a plea. These weren't distant, abstract legal matters for him. They were happening right in his community, and he was an arbiter of life and death. He lived in this house, ate his meals here, and slept here, all while carrying the weight of his role in this tragic affair. Now, let's go back to those ghostly sobs coming from the attic. When historians and preservationists began to seriously study the house and its history, they uncovered a different, more grounded and far more heartbreaking reality. They learned that those sounds weren't the echoes of a condemned witch. Instead, they believed the sounds could be tied to the very real, very human suffering of the Corwin family itself. Judge Corwin and his wife, Elizabeth, had 10 children. In the 17th century, life was fragile and child mortality was devastatingly high. Tragically, records show that several of the Corwin children died in infancy or early childhood. Families of that era often had a room, sometimes an attic or an out-of-the-way space, where a sick child would be isolated to prevent the spread of illness. It was also a place where a grieving mother might retreat to mourn the loss of a child, away from the daily functions of the household. The attic of the Corwin house could very well have been such a place of profound, private grief. So those sobbing sounds that people have reported for years, they might not be supernatural at all. Instead, they could be what paranormal investigators call a residual haunting, or a ftiws, stone tape, recording, an echo of intense, real-life emotion imprinted on the very fabric of the location. Imagine Elizabeth Corwin, a mother, retreating to the quiet solitude of the attic, overcome with grief after losing yet another child. Her inconsolable weeping, a sound of pure human anguish echoing within those walls. It's a sorrow so deep that it seems to have soaked into the very wood and plaster of the house, replaying itself across the centuries for those sensitive enough to hear it. This explanation is, in my opinion, infinitely more poignant than the tale of a phantom witch. It transforms the house from a simple horror attraction into a monument of human tragedy on multiple levels. First, you have the public tragedy of the witch trials, orchestrated in part by the man who lived here. The weight of his decisions, the lives he helped destroy, forever stains the history of the home. Then, layered on top of that, is the private, domestic tragedy of a family experiencing unimaginable loss. The house becomes a symbol not just of injustice, but of deep, personal sorrow. The two narratives are inextricably linked. Could Jonathan Corwin's own conscience have been troubled? We don't have his personal diaries, so we can't know for sure. But some historians speculate. Did he ever lie awake at night in this house, hearing his wife's sobs from the attic, and reflect on the suffering he was inflicting on other families in the courtroom? It's a chilling thought. The man sending people to the gallows based on spectral claims, living in a house potentially haunted by the very real grief of his own family. The irony is staggering. The public believed it was haunted by a witch he condemned, when in reality it may have been haunted by the consequences of ordinary 17th century life and the profound sadness that came with it. This revised history of the witch house completely reframes our understanding of it. It's not a spooky caricature of history. It's a complex and deeply human place. It reminds us that behind the sensational stories of ghosts and goblins are real people who lived, loved, and suffered. The story of the Salem witch trials isn't just about witches. It's about fear, power, and the catastrophic failure of justice. And the story of the Corwin house isn't just about a crying ghost. It's about a family's private pain existing alongside a man's complicity in a public atrocity. So, the next time you see a picture of that iconic black house in Salem, I hope you'll remember this. Think beyond the legend. Think about Judge Jonathan Corwin, wrestling with his role in the trials. And think about Elizabeth Corwin, a grieving mother whose sorrow may still echo from the attic. The real story is always more complicated, and often more moving than the myth. The truth here isn't about witches. It's about the very real, very human ghosts of history. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of Salem's most misunderstood landmarks. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations into the hidden corners of history. And let me know in the comments below, have you ever visited the witch house? Or have you heard a story that turned out to be completely different from the legend? I'd love to hear about it. Until next time, stay curious. Have you ever driven down a lonely, forgotten highway late at night? The kind of road where the trees lean in so close they seem to whisper secrets, and the only light comes from your own headlights cutting through the darkness. On nights like these, your imagination can play tricks on you. But what if what you see isn't a trick? What if it's a warning? Tonight, we're heading down one such road, a stretch of asphalt known to locals only as the Old Highway. It's a place with a history, a place where stories cling to the air like morning fog. and for decades, travelers on this road have reported the same unsettling sight, but only on one specific night of the year, Halloween. They say that as the sun sets and the veil between worlds grows thin, if you're driving along the old highway, you might see it. Sitting patiently on the shoulder of the road, just at the edge of the woods, is a dog. But this is no ordinary stray. It's described as enormous, with fur as black as a moonless night and eyes that seem to absorb the light around them. It just sits there, perfectly still, as if it's waiting. Most people who see it are spooked, but they press their foot on the gas and speed away, chalking it up to a trick of the light or an overactive imagination fueled by the Halloween spirit. But some, the curious or the compassionate, have been known to slow down. They think maybe it's lost, maybe it's hurt. They pull over, their tires crunching on the gravel, and roll down their window. "Hey there, buddy," they might call out. "You okay?" But as they get closer, a sense of unease creeps in. The dog doesn't move. It doesn't wag its tail or bark. It just stares with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. It's bigger than any dog they've ever seen, its form solid and imposing against the dying light. An unnatural chill hangs in the air around it, a cold that has nothing to do with the autumn weather. Something deep inside screams that this is wrong, that they need to leave. Now. And so they do. They quickly roll up the window, put the car in drive, and speed away, their heart pounding in their chest. They check their rearview mirror, but the spot where the dog was sitting is empty. It's vanished as if it were never there. They breathe a sigh of relief, convinced they've narrowly escaped something. They drive home, lock their doors, and try to forget the whole bizarre encounter. But the encounter isn't over. That night, as they lie in bed, trying to sleep, they hear it, a faint sound from outside. Scrape, scrape. It's the sound of claws on pavement, walking slowly up their driveway. Their blood runs cold. They hold their breath, listening. The footsteps stop right outside their front door. Silence. Then a low, heavy scratching begins on the wood. Scratch, scratch. It's not the frantic sound of a lost pet. It's methodical, patient, waiting. This is the core of the legend of the black dog of the old highway. Every driver who reported stopping for a closer look also reported being followed home. Not by the dog itself. No one ever sees it again after that initial roadside sighting. They are followed by the sounds it makes. The slow, deliberate footsteps. The heavy scratching at the door. Some have even reported hearing a low, guttural growl that seems to vibrate through the very walls of their house. The sounds can last for hours, sometimes until the first light of dawn breaks the horizon. And then, as suddenly as they began, they stop. The next morning, when they build up the courage to open the door, there's nothing there. No footprints, no muddy paw prints. But sometimes they find deep, inexplicable scratch marks gouged into the wood of their door, a physical reminder that what they experienced was terrifyingly real. So, what is this phantom creature? Local folklore is filled with theories. Some believe it's a guardian spirit, a spectral watchdog protecting a boundary between our world and another. By stopping, you've acknowledged it, and it follows you to ensure you've truly returned to your own side, leaving you with a chilling reminder not to meddle in things you don't understand. Another, more sinister theory ties the dog to an old, long-forgotten tragedy on that very highway. The story goes that a man lost his loyal canine companion in a hit-and-run accident on Halloween night decades ago. Consumed by grief, he wished for his friend to come back, to find the one responsible. Perhaps this spectral dog is the result of that desperate wish, forever searching the highway and following anyone who shows a flicker of interest, mistaking them for the one it seeks. Of course, skeptics will say it's just mass hysteria, a campfire story that got out of hand. They'll argue that on a dark night the mind can easily turn a shadow or a strangely shaped bush into a monstrous dog. The sounds, the wind, creaking floorboards, an overactive imagination after a good scare. It's all explainable. But can you explain away the experiences of dozens of people, strangers to each other, over so many years, all telling the same story? The massive black dog, the unnerving stillness, and, most importantly, the footsteps that follow them home. They all describe the same methodical pace, the same heavy scratching at the door, the same bone-deep feeling of being watched by something ancient and unseen. The legend serves as a stark warning, a piece of modern folklore passed down from one generation of drivers to the next. The message is clear. If you read driving down the old highway on Halloween night and you see a large black dog sitting by the side of the road, don't stop. Don't slow down. Don't even look too closely. Just keep driving. Because some things are not meant to be understood, and some things, once you give them your attention, will follow you all the way home. What do you think? Is this a simple ghost story, or is there a real, spectral guardian on that lonely stretch of road? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me in the dark tonight. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the mysterious and the unknown. Stay safe out there, and until next time, sleep well. Have you ever felt a chill in a place that's supposed to be a sanctuary? A place of peace that suddenly feels watched? Today, we're journeying to a small, forgotten parish, nestled deep in the countryside, where a single ancient lantern holds a story that blurs the line between the sacred and the spectral. This isn't just any old church. It's a place where, every year on Halloween, something extraordinary and deeply unsettling happens. This church, with its weathered stone and centuries-old stained glass, has a unique tradition: a midnight mass on All Hallows' Eve. It's a solemn service meant to honor the saints and remember the souls who have passed on. But as the clock strikes 12, the congregation isn't just focused on the priest's words. All eyes are on a single, ornate brass lantern hanging above the altar. It hasn't held a candle or been wired for electricity in over 100 years. Yet, every Halloween at the stroke of midnight it begins to glow. It starts as a faint flicker, a soft, ethereal light that seems to pulse with a life of its own. There's no flame, no wick, just a cold, silent luminescence that bathes the altar in an eerie glow. The locals and the few priests who have served here over the decades have a name for it: the Soul Lantern. They believe this is a sign, a beacon lit by the returning spirits of the faithful, drawn back to their beloved church for one night. It's a beautiful thought, isn't it? Souls of loved ones returning to a place of peace. But what if not all the souls who return are peaceful? The legend, passed down through generations, has a darker side. It speaks of a time when the church wasn't just a place of worship, but also a final resting place. The grounds around it are filled with unmarked graves from centuries past, holding souls from times of plague, famine, and conflict. The elders say the lantern doesn't just call back the serene and the sainted, it calls back everyone. And as the light inside the lantern grows stronger, the atmosphere in the church begins to shift. Parishioners have reported sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature, a cold so biting it feels like it's seeping into your bones. They've heard faint whispers carried on the still air, seeming to come from the empty pews beside them. The soft murmur of prayers is sometimes punctuated by a sigh, a muffled cry, or a sound that's chillingly close to a chuckle, right behind their shoulder. It's as if the veil between our world and the next becomes paper-thin within these consecrated walls. The priests who have presided over this Mass describe an almost overwhelming feeling. One former clergyman wrote in his journal, which is now kept in the church archives, "As the lantern glows, you feel the weight of 1,000 eyes upon you. Not all of them are benevolent. You can feel their joy, their sorrow, and for some, their unresolved anger. It's a heavy burden to stand before them, to offer peace to those who may have never known it in life." He described seeing fleeting shadows move in the periphery, dark shapes that would dart behind pillars the moment he tried to look directly at them. One of the most compelling stories comes from a woman named Ilara, whose family has attended this church for centuries. She was a young girl in the 1970s when she attended the midnight mass with her grandmother. As the lantern began to glow, Ilara remembers seeing a figure of a man standing near the baptismal font. He was dressed in old-fashioned, tattered clothing, and his face was etched with a profound sadness. She tugged on her grandmother's sleeve to point him out, but when her grandmother looked, there was no one there. Ilara, however, could still see him, his eyes fixed on the glowing lantern, as if it were a long-lost hope. Then, as quickly as he appeared, he faded, like smoke caught in a draft. But not all encounters are so passive. There are tales of hymn books flying off shelves in the choir loft, of the heavy sacristy door slamming shut on its own, and of the organ letting out a single, discordant note in the dead silence. The current priest, Father Michael, is a pragmatic man, but even he admits there are things in his church that defy logical explanation. He says the lantern's light feels different each year. Sometimes it's a warm, welcoming glow. Other years, it's a cold, almost clinical light, and on those nights the unsettling activity seems to intensify. He believes the lantern acts as a sort of spiritual amplifier. The souls return, he explained in a local interview, and they bring with them the emotions they held at the time of their passing. We pray for the peaceful, but we must also pray for the tormented. On Halloween night, this church becomes a true house of spirits, a place where we are the visitors and they are the congregation. He doesn't see it as something to be feared, but rather as a profound responsibility, to offer solace to every soul that answers the lantern's silent call. Think about it. An object, untouched by human hands, lighting up to bridge the gap between worlds. It's a vessel for memories, for unresolved stories, for the eternal dance between light and shadow. The church lantern is more than just a local legend. It's a living testament to the idea that some places are so saturated with history and human emotion that they hold an echo of the past. An echo that, once a year, becomes loud enough for us to hear. So, if you ever find yourself in a quiet, old church on a dark night, listen closely. You might just hear the whispers of those who came before you, drawn to the light. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the mysterious and the macabre. What do you think is causing the lantern to light up? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more explorations into the unknown. Until next time, stay curious. Spooky, atmospheric music begins, then fades to a low, suspenseful hum. Every town has its stories, right? The kind whispered around campfires or shared on late-night drives. But what if one of those stories wasn't just a story? What if it happened every single year, like clockwork, right under everyone's noses? Today, we're traveling to a small, seemingly ordinary town in the heart of Ohio, a place where autumn leaves paint the streets in brilliant shades of red and gold. But on Halloween night, there's one street that remains untouched, cloaked in an unsettling silence. Blackwood Lane. Year after year, as children swarm the neighborhoods, their laughter echoing and their bags filling with candy, they instinctively avoid this one particular street. It's not on any official "do not go" list. There are no signs or barriers. It's an unspoken rule, a piece of local folklore passed down through generations. The children say the street just feels wrong. The air gets colder. The playful sounds of Halloween night fade into an eerie hush, and the houses, though decorated, seem to watch you with empty eyes. The legend of Blackwood Lane is as old as the town itself. The story goes that decades ago, on a particularly foggy Halloween, a group of trick-or-treaters ventured down the lane, determined to be the bravest kids in town. They were never seen again. Well, that's the most dramatic version. The more common, and perhaps more chilling version is that those who do brave Blackwood Lane don't come back the same. If they come back at all, this isn't just a ghost story. We found local records and newspaper clippings from the 1950s that mention unusual occurrences on Halloween night, specifically centered around that area. One article from the Ohio Star-Gazette in 1958 vaguely reports on several children who became disoriented and lost for hours, only to be found wandering near the edge of town with no memory of where they'd been. They were found with empty candy bags, despite having been out for hours. They were described as quiet, distant, and forever changed by the experience. They lost their spark, their youthful joy replaced by a vacant stare. So, what's really going on at Blackwood Lane? Is it a collective delusion, a town-wide case of suggestion? Or is there something more sinister at play? We spoke to a local historian, a woman named Eleanor Vance, who has lived in the town her entire life. She's in her late 80s now, and her memory is as sharp as a tack. Eleanor told us that the houses on Blackwood Lane were built on what used to be an old, forgotten cemetery. The town expanded quickly in the early 20th century, and proper records weren't always kept. She believes that on Halloween, when the veil between worlds is at its thinnest, the spirits of those forgotten souls become restless. They aren't malicious, she explained, but they are lonely. They see the children, full of life and joy, and they are drawn to that energy. They don't take the children, Eleanor said, her voice a low whisper. They take their joy. They feed on their laughter, their excitement. It's why the kids who come back are so hollow. They've had their happiest memories of the night siphoned away, replaced with a deep, inexplicable sadness. This theory is bone-chilling. Imagine a street that doesn't steal your life, but steals your happiness. It explains why the children who return can't explain what happened. How do you describe an invisible theft of emotion? How do you tell your parents that the house with the smiling pumpkin didn't give you candy, but instead took a piece of your soul? You can't, so you stay silent. We decided to look into the residents of Blackwood Lane. Who lives there now? It turns out the street has a remarkably high turnover rate. Families move in, drawn by the beautiful old homes and quiet atmosphere, but few stay longer than a year or two. We found online forums where former residents shared their experiences. They spoke of strange occurrences, especially around October. The feeling of being constantly watched, disembodied whispers just out of earshot, and an overwhelming sense of melancholy that would settle over their homes as Halloween approached. One former resident who posted anonymously wrote, "We were so excited for our first Halloween there. We bought pounds of candy, decorated the whole house, but not a single child came to our door. Not one. It was the strangest thing." Around 9 p.m., we started hearing what sounded like faint laughter outside, like a party we weren't invited to. But when we looked out, the street was completely empty. We packed up and moved 2 months later. I couldn't shake the feeling that the house didn't want us there. This account lines up perfectly with Eleanor's theory. The spirits are having their own celebration, drawing energy not from the living, but from the echoes of joy that children bring. The houses themselves seem to participate, luring people in with their charm, only to reveal their chilling secret when the time is right. Perhaps the most compelling piece of evidence we found was from a group of paranormal investigators who visited Blackwood Lane in 2011. Their report is fascinating. They documented significant EVP, or electronic voice phenomena, with recordings of what sound like children's laughter and faint calls of trick or treat, when no children were present. Their thermal cameras picked up inexplicable cold spots moving along the sidewalks, the exact size and shape of small children. They concluded that the street was a site of significant residual spiritual energy, a sort of endless loop of a long-forgotten Halloween night. The investigators also reported a strange equipment malfunction. All of their devices that recorded time began to run slow. Over the course of the 6 hours they were on Blackwood Lane, their clocks and watches lost a total of 37 minutes. It's as if time itself gets warped on that street, further blurring the line between the past and the present. So, every year, the children of this small Ohio town continue their tradition. They follow an invisible map, their paths weaving through every street but one. They don't know the full history, the newspaper articles, or the paranormal investigations. They only know what their senses tell them. Stay away from Blackwood Lane. It's a place where the treats are your own happy memories. And the trick is that you never see it coming. The greatest horror isn't always a monster jumping out of the shadows. Sometimes it's the quiet dread of a place that wants to steal your smile, leaving you with an emptiness you can't explain, an echo of a joy you can no longer remember. What do you think is happening on Blackwood Lane? Is it a paranormal phenomenon, a mass psychological event, or something else entirely? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you have a local legend from your own hometown, I'd love to hear it. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey into the unexplained. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the mysteries that hide just beneath the surface of our world. Stay curious, stay safe, and maybe stick to the well-lit streets this Halloween. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're journeying deep into the heart of Louisiana, to a place where the veil between our world and the next seems particularly thin, especially around Halloween. We're talking about a story that has whispered its way through local folklore for generations. The legend of the grave that opens by itself. Imagine a quiet, old cemetery, the kind with moss-draped oaks and weathered headstones that tell tales of centuries past. Among these silent sentinels lies one particular grave, unremarkable for most of the year. But as the air chills and October 31st approaches, something strange is said to happen. A crack appears, slowly widening, as if something or someone is pushing from within. This isn't just a spooky campfire story. Over the years, countless locals and curious visitors have claimed to witness it. They describe a fissure forming in the earth above the coffin, a clean break with no signs of digging or disturbance. It's as if the ground itself is exhaling, parting to reveal the darkness below. By morning, the grave is said to be open, an eerie, silent invitation to the unknown. Naturally, a story this persistent attracts attention. What could be causing it? The most obvious explanation would be animals. A burrowing creature, perhaps a badger or an armadillo, could certainly dig up the soil. To investigate this, soil and ground samples have been taken from around the site over the years. The results? Inconclusive, but fascinating. The analyses have consistently shown no evidence of animal burrowing. The soil structure is disturbed, but not in a way that suggests claws and digging. It's more like a void has formed from beneath, causing the surface to collapse. So, if it's not animals, what else could it be? The next logical suspect is human intervention. A prankster, right? Someone with a shovel and a flair for the dramatic, trying to keep a local legend alive. This theory makes sense on the surface. It's the most rational explanation. However, there are a few holes in this theory. The cemetery is often monitored, especially around Halloween, by both law enforcement and amateur ghost hunters. Despite the extra eyes, no one has ever been caught in the act. The grave simply opens. Furthermore, those who claim to have seen it happen describe a slow, gradual process, not the work of a quick shovel. Let's consider the natural, scientific possibilities. Louisiana's unique geology could play a role. The ground there is notoriously soft and marshy. Could fluctuations in the water table, combined with the natural decay process happening underground, create pressure changes that force the earth to shift? As organic matter within the coffin decomposes, it releases gases. This gas could build up, creating a pocket of pressure. A change in atmospheric pressure or a shift in the water-saturated soil could be the final trigger, causing the weakened ground above to give way. It's a plausible theory. The ground collapses into the hollow space created by decomposition. This could explain the hollow space found in the samples and the lack of animal signs. It's a clean, scientific explanation. But does it explain the timing? Why does it supposedly happen every Halloween? This is where science bows out and folklore takes center stage. Coincidence can only be stretched so far before it snaps. For the phenomenon to repeat with such specific, spooky timing year after year is what elevates this from a geological curiosity to a true paranormal legend. It's the kind of detail that makes you wonder if there's more to the story. To understand that, we have to look at who is buried there. The identity of the grave's occupant is a key part of the legend, though records from that long ago can be murky and conflicting. One popular version of the story says the grave belongs to a woman who was accused of practicing voodoo in the 19th century. Legend has it she was an outcast, feared and misunderstood by the community. On her deathbed, she supposedly vowed that her spirit would never rest, and that every year, on the night when spirits walk the earth, she would rise to prove her power. It's a chilling tale, one that paints a picture of a restless soul seeking justice, or perhaps just acknowledgement from the world that shunned her. Another version of the tale is less about revenge and more about love. This story claims the grave belongs to a young woman who died of a broken heart, waiting for her lover to return from war. He never came back, and she promised to wait for him, even in death. Every Halloween, her spirit is said to push open the grave, hoping to finally see him return. It's a tragic, romantic twist that adds a layer of sorrow to the mystery. Whether a vengeful priestess or a heartbroken lover, the stories give a powerful motive to the unexplained event. They provide a why for the what. So, what do we have? We have a fascinating mystery with three competing explanations. First, the scientific one. A perfect storm of decomposition, gas pressure, and unique soil mechanics, with the Halloween timing being a folkloric exaggeration. Second, the human element. A long-running, incredibly clever hoax that has managed to evade detection for decades. And third, the paranormal explanation. The fulfillment of a dying promise, a spirit so restless that it can physically move the earth that covers it. Each theory has its believers and its skeptics. For the scientifically minded, the combination of natural factors is the only logical answer. For the pragmatists, a human hand is far more likely than a ghostly one. But for those who have stood in that cemetery as the sun sets on October 30th, who have felt the history and the heavy atmosphere of the place, the idea of a restless spirit doesn't seem so far-fetched. The grave that opens by itself remains one of Louisiana's most enduring and unsettling legends. It sits at the perfect intersection of science, folklore, and the unknown. Maybe the real answer is a combination of all three. Perhaps a natural phenomenon started the legend, which was then embellished by stories and maybe even helped along by a prankster or two over the years. Or maybe, just maybe, in the deep, humid South, some promises are strong enough to transcend even the finality of death. What do you think is happening? Is it science, a prank, or something else entirely? Let me know your theories in the comments below. I'd love to read them. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more explorations of strange and mysterious places. We'll see you next time. Have you ever received a phone call from a number you knew you shouldn't be seeing? A number that sends a shiver down your spine before you even answer? Tonight, we're diving into a story that does just that. A story that blurs the line between our world and whatever lies beyond. It's a tale that began on a chilly Halloween night in 1984, with a ringing phone and a voice that should have been silent forever. Our story centers around a woman named Martha. Life for Martha had been a quiet, somber affair for the past 3 years. In 1981, she had lost her husband, Bill, to a sudden and tragic accident. Bill was the love of her life, her high school sweetheart, her partner in every sense of the word. His absence left a void in her heart that time had only managed to dull, but never truly heal. She kept his memory alive in the small, quiet corners of her home. His favorite armchair still sat by the fireplace, his old records were still stacked by the stereo, and his photo was on her nightstand, a constant, smiling presence. On this particular Halloween, Martha had decided against participating in the usual festivities. The laughter of trick-or-treaters and the cheerful decorations felt distant. Instead, she was curled up on the sofa with a book and a warm cup of tea, the gentle patter of rain against the window pane her only company. It was a night like any other, a quiet evening of solitude and remembrance. Until the phone rang. The shrill, piercing sound cut through the silence of the house, making Martha jump. She glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. Who would be calling at this hour? Annoyed, she placed her bookmark and walked over to the old rotary phone in the hallway. Her friends and family knew she went to bed early. Maybe it was a wrong number. She picked up the receiver, a slight edge of irritation in her voice. "Hello?" Silence. Only a faint, crackling static on the other end, like a distant storm. "Hello?" she repeated, a little louder this time. "Is anyone there?" She was about to hang up, dismissing it as a prank caller taking advantage of the Halloween spirit, when a sound trickled through the static. It was faint, barely audible, but it was there. A whisper. Martha pressed the receiver tighter to her ear. "I'm sorry, I can't hear you," she said, her frustration melting into curiosity. The static seemed to ebb and flow, and then the whisper came again, clearer this time, yet impossibly distorted. It was a single, drawn-out word that made the hair on her arms stand up. It sounded like a name. Her name. Martha. A cold dread began to creep up her spine. The voice, there was something unnervingly familiar about it. It was low and raspy, as if being forced through a throat that hadn't been used in years. But beneath the static and the strange, airy quality, there was a cadence, a tone that struck a chord deep within her memory. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice trembling slightly. The line was quiet for a moment, the static returning like a tide. Martha's heart was pounding in her chest. Every horror movie she'd ever seen, every ghost story she'd ever heard, seemed to be playing out in her own hallway. She was on the verge of slamming the phone down when the voice spoke again. 2 simple, chilling words. "It's me." Martha froze. "Me?" she whispered, her mind racing. "Me who?" It couldn't be. It was impossible. A cruel, sick joke, but the voice, despite its ghostly echo, was undeniably Bill's. It was his voice, twisted and broken, but it was his. Her hand, holding the phone, began to shake uncontrollably. Tears welled in her eyes. Tears of confusion, of fear, of a desperate, illogical hope. "Bill?" she choked out, the name feeling foreign on her lips after 3 years of silence. "Bill, is that really you? This isn't funny." The only response was that same, unnerving static, a sound that seemed to be breathing. "If this is some kind of prank, it's the cruelest joke anyone has ever played," she cried into the phone. Then the voice returned, clearer than before, cutting through the static with a chilling finality. It wasn't angry, it wasn't sad, it was just a statement, a simple, horrifying declaration that defied all logic and reason. "I'm still here." And then a final, raspy whisper, "I'm in the ground, but I'm still here." After that, the line went dead. Not with a click, but with a sudden, absolute silence, as if the connection had simply vanished into thin air. Martha stood frozen in the hallway, the silent receiver still pressed to her ear. Her mind was a whirlwind of terror and disbelief. She slowly, mechanically, hung up the phone. She checked the number on her caller ID, a new feature she'd recently had installed. The blood drained from her face. The number displayed was her own. Or rather, it was the number of the phone line that had been registered to her and Bill. It was the house line. The call had come from inside the house, but that was impossible. She was the only one home. She checked every room, every closet, under every bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. The house was empty. The doors were locked, the windows latched. There was no one there. The call didn't make sense. The number didn't make sense. And the voice of her dead husband. That made the least sense of all. For days, Martha was a wreck. She couldn't sleep, she couldn't eat. Every time the phone rang, she would flinch. She told her sister, who, while sympathetic, gently suggested it was a prank, or perhaps a vivid dream brought on by grief and the eerie atmosphere of Halloween. Martha wanted to believe her. She truly did. But she couldn't shake the chilling certainty of what she had heard. It wasn't a dream. It was too real. A week later, still haunted by the call, Martha felt an inexplicable pull to visit Bill's grave. It was something she hadn't done in months. The cemetery was quiet and peaceful under the gray November sky. She stood before his headstone, the cold marble bearing his name and the dates that marked his short life. She laid a small bouquet of flowers at the base, her mind replaying the ghostly phone call over and over. As she stood there, lost in thought, the cemetery groundskeeper, an old man named George, approached her. He had known Bill and offered his condolences when he passed. "Afternoon, Martha," he said gently. "Haven't seen you in a while." Martha managed a weak smile. They spoke for a few minutes about the weather, about the changing leaves. Then George mentioned something that made Martha's blood run cold. He told her that on Halloween night there had been a strange occurrence. A powerful lightning strike had hit the cemetery during a brief, intense storm right around midnight. It hadn't hit a tree or a building. It had struck the ground directly. George pointed to a patch of freshly turned earth, not far from where they stood. It was right over the oldest section of the cemetery's underground telephone and electrical conduits, and it was just a few yards away from Bill's grave. The strike had caused a massive power surge, frying some of the cemetery's lighting and, according to the phone company, causing a bizarre series of electrical crosses and shorts in the old, decaying underground lines. Some residents nearby had reported strange static, crossed lines, and even hearing faint disembodied voices on their phones that night. The phone company had dismissed it as a freak electrical event, a one-in-a-million anomaly caused by the lightning hitting the antiquated copper wiring buried deep in the earth. Martha stood there, staring at the patch of scorched ground, her mind connecting the dots. The lightning strike, the underground phone lines running right past Bill's final resting place, the static, the voice. Was it possible? Could a freak act of nature, a bolt of lightning, have somehow created a pathway? Could it have momentarily charged the very air and earth, allowing a voice, an echo, a memory from the other side to travel through the old copper wires and into her home? It was a wild, fantastical thought, one that defied science and logic. But in that moment, standing by her husband's grave, it felt more real and more plausible than any other explanation. It wasn't a cruel prank. It wasn't a grief-induced hallucination. It was a message, a glitch in the fabric of reality, a brief, impossible connection. Bill's whisper, "I'm still here," wasn't just a ghostly phrase. For Martha, it became a strange, terrifying, and yet somehow comforting assurance. An impossible phone call from the cemetery, telling her that even in death, a part of him remained. Martha never received another call like that again. The mystery was never solved, and the phone company's report remained the only official explanation. But Martha held on to her own truth. Sometimes when the house is quiet and the wind howls outside, she thinks she can almost hear a faint whisper in the static of an open phone line, a final, loving goodbye from somewhere beyond the veil. What do you think? A freak electrical event, or something more? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more dives into the unknown. Have you ever heard a story that's both spooky and incredibly heartwarming? Today, I want to share one that might just change how you see Halloween. It takes place in a place you least expect to find a ghost story. A children's hospital ward. So, grab a warm drink, get comfortable, and let's journey to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, or at least a ward very much like it, where one Halloween night became a local legend. Our story begins on a crisp October 31st. The halls of the pediatric oncology ward were quieter than usual. Many of the young patients, those well enough, had gone home to experience the magic of trick-or-treating. For those who remained, the dedicated nurses and staff did their best to bring the Halloween spirit to them. The ward was adorned with cheerful decorations, smiling pumpkins, friendly ghosts made from white sheets, and strings of orange and black paper bats. The atmosphere was one of gentle festivity, a brave attempt to create normalcy in a place defined by its opposite. In the center of the ward was the playroom, a sanctuary filled with every toy a child could dream of. There were building blocks stacked in colorful towers, dolls waiting patiently for a tea party, and a beloved wooden rocking horse named Comet, with a worn saddle and a kind, painted-on smile. This room was the heart of the ward, a place where laughter, for a little while, could drown out the beeping of machines. On this particular Halloween, as evening settled in, the playroom was empty. The toys sat silent and still under the soft glow of the nightlights. The first person to notice something unusual was a veteran nurse named Maria. She'd worked the night shift on this ward for over 15 years. She knew its every sound, its every shadow. As she was doing her rounds around 10 p.m., she passed the glass-walled playroom. She paused, thinking she saw a flicker of movement out of the corner of her eye. She peered inside. Nothing. The room was just as it had been left. Shaking her head, she chalked it up to fatigue, a common companion on long night shifts. But about an hour later, a younger nurse, Ben, came to find her, his eyes wide. "Maria," he whispered, "you need to see this." He led her back to the playroom. This time there was no mistaking it. Inside the empty locked room, things were happening. A set of colorful building blocks was slowly, methodically, arranging itself into a wobbly tower. On the other side of the room, a doll was gently rocking back and forth in a tiny rocking chair. And, most astonishingly, Comet, the old wooden rocking horse, was swaying gently on his own, as if an invisible child were riding him into a gentle dream. Maria and Ben stood there, mouths agape, a mix of fear and wonder washing over them. They weren't alone for long. The quiet commotion drew other staff members. Soon, a small group of nurses and a night-duty doctor stood gathered outside the playroom, witnessing the impossible. There was no wind, no drafts, no strings attached. The toys were moving with a gentle, playful purpose. The plastic rings on a stacking toy were being placed on their post, one by one. The little cars were rolling slowly across the playmat, careful not to crash into one another. Instead of panic, a strange sense of peace settled over the staff. Maria, who had seen so much in her years on the ward, was the first to voice what they were all starting to feel. "It's the children," she said softly, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "It's our kids who couldn't go home for Halloween. They've come back to play." The idea, as strange as it was, felt right. These weren't malicious spirits. The energy in the air was light, joyful, and innocent. It felt like the echo of 1,000 happy moments that had once filled that very room. The staff watched for over an hour. They didn't see any figures or apparitions, only the joyful dance of the toys. They saw the spinning top whirl on its own, the toy train chug along its plastic track, and the pages of a picture book turn as if being read by tiny, unseen hands. It was a silent, beautiful party, a secret celebration for those who could only attend in spirit. The nurses began to whisper stories about former patients they remembered with fondness. They talked about Lily, who had loved that specific dollhouse, and young Sam, who could spend hours building the tallest block towers imaginable. They imagined him now, finally finishing his masterpiece. As the clock neared midnight, the activity began to slow. The blocks settled into a final, triumphant tower. The rocking horse gave one last gentle sway before coming to a complete stop. The doll in the rocking chair stilled. By the time the first chime of midnight echoed from a clock down the hall, the playroom was silent once more. Every toy was back in its place, perfectly still, as if nothing had happened at all. The only evidence of the night's events was the perfectly built block tower and the shared, unbelievable memory of the staff who witnessed it. The story of the Halloween hospital ward spread in whispers among the hospital staff in the days that followed. It was never officially reported, of course. How could it be? But it became a cherished piece of folklore, a story told to new nurses to remind them that the ward was more than just a medical facility. It was a place of love, memory, and an unbreakable spirit. Some nurses claimed that every Halloween since, if you listen closely, you can still hear the faint sound of laughter from the empty playroom, a gentle reminder that for some, the invitation to come back and play is never rescinded. This story teaches us that love and memory are powerful forces that even the walls of a hospital can't contain. It suggests that on a night like Halloween, when the veil between worlds is said to be at its thinnest, perhaps it's not the scary things that cross over, but the joyful, loving spirits who just want one more night to play. It's a comforting thought, isn't it, that those we've lost might still find moments of simple, innocent happiness. So this Halloween, if you see a light flicker or hear a strange noise, maybe don't be so quick to be scared. It might just be a happy memory, stopping by to say hello. What do you think? Do you believe in gentle hauntings like this one? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading your stories and perspectives. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more tales that explore the mysteries of our world. It really helps the channel grow. Until next time, stay curious and take care. Have you ever felt a chill run down your spine for no reason? Or caught a flicker of movement out of the corner of your eye, only to find nothing there? Tonight, we're diving deep into a story that has haunted a small, forgotten town for over 60 years. The chilling tale of the girl in the yellow dress. Imagine this. A set of old, abandoned train tracks, rusting away, swallowed by weeds and the relentless march of time. These tracks, once a lifeline for the town, now hold a silent, sorrowful memory. And every October, as the leaves turn to shades of fire and rust, she appears. A young girl, no older than 10, wearing a simple, faded yellow dress. Those who have seen her say the air grows cold. The usual night sounds of crickets and rustling leaves fall silent. She doesn't float or glide like in the movies. She walks, her steps barely making a sound on the gravel. Her expression is one of profound, unending sadness, and her eyes seem to look right through you, searching for something she can never find. Her name, they say, was Lily. Back in 1962, this town was a different place. The railway was its heartbeat. Lily and her younger brother Thomas were inseparable. They spent their summer days playing near these very tracks, their laughter echoing through the fields. Thomas, just 7 years old, was a whirlwind of energy, always chasing butterflies or daring his sister to a race. One crisp afternoon in October, they were playing their favorite game of hide-and-seek. Lily, wearing her favorite yellow dress, a birthday gift from her mother, counted to 100 while Thomas ran off to find the perfect hiding spot. He loved the old railway cars that were sometimes parked on the siding, a perfect labyrinth for a small boy. Lily finished counting. "Ready or not, here I come," she called out, her voice full of playful anticipation. She searched behind the old oak tree, checked the thick bushes by the creek, but Thomas was nowhere to be found. She giggled, thinking he must have found an excellent new spot. As the sun began to dip lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a sense of unease started to creep in. She called his name. "Thomas, game's over. Come on out." But the only reply was the lonely whistle of the wind through the tall grass. Panic began to set in. She ran along the tracks, her heart pounding in her chest, her calls growing more frantic. She didn't know that Thomas, in his excitement, had slipped while trying to climb between two freight cars. He had fallen onto the tracks, hidden from view. At that exact moment, the 5:15 freight train, running unusually fast to make up for lost time, thundered down the line. The engineer never saw him. The screech of the brakes and the horrific sounds that followed would become a permanent scar on the town's memory. By the time Lily reached the spot, it was too late. Her world, once so bright and full of laughter, shattered into a million pieces. The town mourned. The family was broken. But for Lily, the game never ended. Her mind couldn't accept the horrible reality. In her heart, her brother was simply still hiding, waiting for her to find him. She spent her days walking those tracks, her yellow dress becoming a symbol of her unending search, calling his name until her voice was hoarse. A few years later, heartbroken and lost in her own world of grief, Lily passed away. But her search, it seems, continues. Locals will tell you with a shiver to stay away from the tracks in October. Hikers and ghost hunters who have dared to venture there report the same eerie encounter. Suddenly, a young girl in a faded yellow dress appears before them. She looks at them with those heartbreakingly sad eyes and asks a single, soft-spoken question. "Have you seen my brother?" They say if you answer no, she simply fades away, continuing her lonely patrol. But one legend claims that if you were to answer yes, and point in the direction of the old town cemetery where he was laid to rest, she might finally find peace. But no one has ever been brave enough to try. The sheer, overwhelming sorrow that radiates from her is too much to bear. One local historian, a man named Arthur, has spent years collecting eyewitness accounts. He showed me a journal entry from a railway worker dated October 1975. It reads, "Saw the girl again tonight. Same yellow dress. Asked me about her brother. It's been over a decade, but that look in her eyes. It freezes you to the bone. I just shook my head and walked away as fast as I could. God rest that poor child's soul." More recent accounts come from teenagers who, on a dare, went to the tracks with cameras and EVP recorders. They captured faint, chilling audio. Amidst the static, you can just make out a child's voice whispering a single name. Thomas? They fled in terror, swearing never to return. The footage they took was shaky and dark, but for a split second, a small figure in a pale dress seems to appear and then vanish. What's truly fascinating is the consistency of the reports over 6 decades. Different people, from different generations, all describe the exact same thing. A young girl, a yellow dress, and the same heartbreaking question. Is it mass hysteria, a story told so many times that people begin to see what they expect to see? Or is it possible that a love so strong, a grief so profound, can truly leave an imprint on a place, replaying a tragedy over and over? Perhaps Lily isn't a ghost in the traditional sense. Perhaps she is an echo, a memory trapped in time, forever searching for the brother she lost on that tragic autumn day. Her story serves as a somber reminder of how fragile life is and how love and loss can resonate through time, long after we are gone. So, if you ever find yourself near a set of abandoned train tracks as the October leaves begin to fall, listen carefully. You might just hear a soft voice on the wind, and if a little girl in a yellow dress approaches you, what will you say? Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations into the world's most fascinating mysteries. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a paranormal experience of your own. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe. Have you ever checked your security camera footage, expecting to see a package delivery or a stray cat, only to find something that makes your blood run cold? That's exactly what happened to the Thompson family one ordinary Tuesday morning. What they saw on their CCTV replay wasn't just unusual, it was downright impossible. It started like any other day. The kids were off to school, the parents at work. The house was quiet, seemingly secure. But when Mr. Thompson decided to check the overnight recordings, something caught his eye. There, in the grainy, monochrome world of the infrared camera, a figure was slowly making its way across their backyard. It wasn't a burglar in a ski mask or a teenager taking a shortcut. No, this was something straight out of a forgotten carnival. The figure was dressed in a full clown costume, Not a modern, brightly colored one, but an old-style, baggy suit with a ruffled collar, looking like something from the black and white era. The face was obscured by what looked like a classic white-painted mask with a permanent, unsettling smile. The footage, time-stamped at 3:17 a.m., showed the clown simply walking. It ambled across the lawn, its movements slow and deliberate, almost like a performer on a silent stage. It paused near the children's swing set, turning its head slowly from side to side as if admiring the quiet suburban landscape. Mr. Thompson felt a shiver go down his spine. It was creepy enough to have a stranger dressed as a clown in his yard in the dead of night. But as he continued watching, the initial unease turned into sheer disbelief. The clown walked towards the side gate, the one leading to the front yard. Mr. Thompson knew that gate was locked. He'd checked it himself before going to bed, a nightly ritual. It was a heavy, wrought iron gate with a solid deadbolt. He watched, expecting the clown to rattle the gate, find it locked, and turn back. But that's not what happened. The figure didn't stop. It didn't slow down. It just kept walking. And then, for a split second that defied all logic, the clown walked through the solid, locked gate. There was no glitch in the video, no jump cut. The figure simply passed through the iron bars as if they were made of smoke, reappearing whole on the other side before calmly continuing its journey down the driveway and out of the camera's view. Mr. Thompson replayed the clip. Once, twice, 10 times. He called his wife, who rushed home from work. They watched it together, their minds racing. Was it a trick of the light? A bizarre technical glitch? But the footage was stable. The gate was clearly solid before, during, and after the clown passed through it. They went outside to inspect it. The gate was still locked. The deadbolt was firmly in place. There were no scuff marks, no signs of tampering, nothing. It was as if the laws of physics had taken a brief holiday in their backyard. Naturally, their next call was to the police. 2 officers arrived, looking skeptical, as you might expect. They listened patiently to the Thompsons' frantic story. Then they watched the footage. The officers' expression shifted from professional skepticism to wide-eyed confusion. They replayed the clip, just as the Thompsons had. They muttered to each other, pointing at the screen. They went outside, inspected the gate themselves, confirming it was secure and undamaged. They couldn't explain it. An official investigation was launched, but it led nowhere. They canvassed the neighborhood, but no one else had seen anything unusual. No local party stores had rented out a similar costume. There were no reports of strange individuals or pranksters in the area. The police were baffled. They had video evidence of a person trespassing, but the evidence itself showed an act that was physically impossible. How do you track a suspect who can walk through solid objects? The case file remained open, but inactive. The Thompsons, understandably, were terrified. They installed more cameras, upgraded their locks, and slept with the lights on for weeks. But the clown never returned. The footage went viral in online forums dedicated to paranormal and unexplained phenomena. Theories flew. Was it a ghost? An interdimensional being? An elaborate, high-tech prank using visual effects so sophisticated they could fool everyone, including the police? The Phantom Clown of Suburbia, as the internet dubbed it, became a modern ghost story. A chilling reminder that sometimes, even with our high-tech eyes watching over us, there are things that happen in the quiet moments of the night that we can't explain. The footage remains a puzzle. It shows a person in a place they shouldn't be, doing something they couldn't possibly do. The Thompson family was left with a secure home, an impossible memory, and the unsettling knowledge that their locked gate might not be enough to keep the real nightmares out. What do you think happened? Was it a clever prank, a software glitch, or something else entirely? Let me know your theories down in the comments. We're always fascinated by stories that sit on the edge of reality. If you enjoyed this dive into the unexplained, please hit that like button and subscribe for more mysteries that will keep you up at night. Thanks for watching, and stay curious. Hello, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're dimming the lights and tuning into a story that has haunted the airwaves for over 4 decades. It's a tale that blends the ordinary with the inexplicable, a ghost in the machine that still sends shivers down the spines of those who know it. Our story begins on a chilly Halloween night in 1979, a time of disco, classic rock, and the golden age of radio. Imagine a small local radio station, the kind that was the heartbeat of its community. The DJ for the late-night shift was probably named something like Rockin' Rick or Midnight Mike. The studio would be a cozy, cluttered space, walls lined with egg carton soundproofing and shelves overflowing with vinyl records. The air would smell of old paper, warm electronics, and stale coffee. Outside, the world was getting ready for Halloween. Kids were sorting their candy hauls and spooky movies were playing on television. Inside the booth, it was just another night on the job. The playlist for that evening was a standard mix of popular hits. The DJ would spin a record, cue up the next one, and maybe read a few local announcements. It was a familiar, comforting routine. But on this particular Halloween, something broke through the familiar rhythm of the night. During a live music segment, as a popular song played out to the listeners tuned in across the town and the surrounding countryside, another sound bled through the broadcast. It wasn't static. It wasn't feedback from a microphone. It was the unmistakable, terrifying sound of screaming. At first, listeners might have thought it was a prank. It was Halloween, after all. A bit of spooky audio theater wasn't out of the ordinary. Stations across the country were playing War of the Worlds, or airing horror-themed specials. But this felt different. The screams weren't theatrical. They were raw, filled with genuine panic and terror. They were the kind of sounds that make the hair on your arms stand up. They cut through the music, sharp and desperate, before vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. The song continued playing as if nothing had happened, leaving listeners in a state of confused silence. The station's phone lines immediately lit up. Confused and concerned listeners called in, asking what had just happened. Was it a joke? Was someone hurt? In the studio, the scene was one of utter confusion. The on-air DJ was just as baffled as his audience. He hadn't heard anything unusual through his studio monitors. To him, the song had played perfectly. He assured the callers it must have been some kind of signal interference, a crossed wire from another broadcast, perhaps. But the station's chief engineer was called in to investigate, because the sheer number of calls suggested this was more than a simple technical glitch. The engineer was a practical man, someone who understood the logic of wires, transmitters, and frequencies. He began a methodical check of all the equipment. He examined the turntable, the mixing board, the broadcast transmitter, and every inch of cable connecting them. He found nothing. No faulty wiring, no open microphones, no crossed signals. According to every piece of equipment, the broadcast had been clean. The song had gone out, and that was it. The screams, it seemed, had come from nowhere. He confirmed the studio and the entire station building had been empty, aside from the lone DJ in the booth. There was no physical source for the sound. The engineer was stumped, but his investigation didn't stop there. He went back to the master recording of the broadcast, the tape that captured everything that went out over the airwaves. He rewound it to the moment of the incident, pressed play, and listened intently. And there they were, faint but undeniably present on the tape. The same desperate screams the listeners had reported. They were woven into the magnetic fabric of the tape, a ghost captured in the machine. It was impossible. The equipment showed no input, yet the output contained a voice that hadn't been in the studio. This is where the story takes a much darker turn. Word of the phantom broadcast spread through the small community. A local police officer, hearing the story, felt a chilling sense of recognition. A few weeks prior, a teenage girl from a neighboring town had gone missing. Her case had grown cold, with no leads and no witnesses. The officer had been one of the last people to hear her voice, a recording from a frantic, disconnected 911 call she had made. He asked the radio station for a copy of their broadcast tape. He needed to compare the sounds. The engineer isolated the audio of the screams from the music. The officer listened, his expression growing more grim with every second. He then played the recording from the girl's 911 call. The comparison was terrifying. The pitch, the cadence, the sheer terror in the voice, they were a match. The screams that had mysteriously appeared on the radio broadcast belonged to the missing girl. It was her voice, crying out from the ether, broadcast to an entire town on Halloween night. The revelation sent a shockwave through the community. What was once a spooky radio mystery had become a potential clue in a tragic disappearance. How was this possible? How could a young woman's voice from a separate time and place manifest itself on a live radio broadcast? The rational explanations began to fall away, replaced by unsettling questions. Was it a supernatural plea for help? A psychic echo of a terrible event imprinted on the airwaves? Or was there a more complex but still unexplained scientific phenomenon at play, like an atmospheric condition that somehow trapped and rebroadcast an old signal? Investigators revisited the girl's case with renewed urgency, but the phantom broadcast provided no concrete clues to her whereabouts. It was a voice without a location, a cry without a context. The mystery of her disappearance remained unsolved. The radio station became a local legend, a place touched by something inexplicable. The staff who worked there that night would never forget it. The story was passed down from one generation of DJs to the next, a cautionary tale about the strange things that can happen when the veil between worlds seems thinnest, especially on a night like Halloween. Over the years, the story has been embellished, as all good ghost stories are. Some versions claim the screams reappear on that station every Halloween. Others say the DJ quit his job the very next day, too spooked to ever sit alone in a radio booth at night again. But the core of the story, the documented event of unexplained screams matching the voice of a missing person, remains a chilling and verified piece of local lore. It's a haunting reminder that sometimes technology can capture more than we intend, picking up on echoes of tragedy that linger in the world around us. It makes you wonder what other secrets are floating on the silent frequencies, just waiting for the right conditions to be heard. Thank you for joining me for this dive into the unknown. If you have any similar stories or theories, I'd love to read them in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more explorations of strange and mysterious events. Stay safe, stay curious, and until next time, keep listening to the static. You never know what you might hear.